Shibboleth and some of the components and the flow of how it actually works. So Shibboleth is a technology that allows federated access management. It isn't the only technology, but it's the main default one that the UK Federation was based off. It's a standard-based software, so it's all open source and based on standard protocols. And a core part of that is open SAML. Shibboleth is also known as middleware. So here we can see clearly Shibboleth is sat in the middle, which is why it's called middleware. And on the left we've got the identity provider, and here you've got the user database and the attribute store. And you can see the authentication and all the attribute stores, user databases are kept separate from the Shibboleth components. And on the other side we've got the web resource and the authorization, again totally separate from the instance of Shibboleth. So what you've got here is a simple overview of the typical process of Shibboleth 1.3. And here we've got an example of a user trying to get access to a resource. So we split this up into each individual part so you can see how it all works. So the first thing that happens is the user will actually try and access the web resource. So this is number one. The service provider software will realise that there isn't actually a session present at this time. So the service provider now needs to get the user logged in. Well, at the moment it doesn't actually know where that user is from. So this is where we use the discovery service, which used to be called the Where Are You From service, which is basically just a website with a drop-down list of every single institution that's part of the UK Federation. Once they're here, the user will actually select the institution that they're from, to the way for them forward onto the identity provider for that particular user. When they get to the identity provider, if you remember on the previous slide, you can see that Shibboleth didn't actually have its own authentication. So what you see here is the component, the SSO. This is what actually does the authentication. So the user will then be asked to put their credentials in. If the credentials successful, and this is normally done against an Active Directory or eDirectory or database, if that's successful, they're then given a handle for that particular session. This handle is then passed back to the service provider. So now the service provider has got a context, security context for that particular user. What it doesn't have is any information about attributes to make authorization decisions. So the second phase of this is to actually pass it on to the attribute requester. So here, the SP passes the handle over to the attribute authority on the identity provider. The attribute authority then looks into the user directory. In most cases, this is the same directory that you use for your authentication. Here we can actually pick up any attributes. For example, if we said eBedos was the person who logged in, we can pull up information about eBedos from that database. So it could be staff@kidderminster.ac.uk, for example. This attribute is then passed back to the attribute requester and the service provider software, where it can then be used to decide whether whether that attribute is enough to get access to the resource. So, for example, in this case, only staff users may be able to access the web resource. So staff@kidderminster.ac.uk will allow me to get through. We'll go through later some of the benefits of Shibboleth 2, but here we go through a typical process in Shibboleth 2, which is slightly different. So here we've got this cut down version of the previous slide, the previous process. In this instance, the user actually tries to access the resource. The service provider still needs to know where the user's from. The user selects it again, the same as the WAF. So at this time, once the user's actually logged in, instead of just first of all sending the authentication and then sending back the attributes in a separate call, in Shibboleth 2, this is all done in one login. So you can see here, you've logged in, it's now got the data and the actual attributes as well. So as you can see here, this all flows through the user's browser, again, which is slightly different from Shibboleth 1.3. Once the data is in the Shibboleth, the web server, then everything else is exactly the same as Shibboleth 1.3. A big part of the UK Federation is getting the correct attributes to access resources, and there are 4 core attributes for the UK Federation. The first one of those is the eduperson scoped affiliation. This attribute stores the affiliation of the user to the institution. Typical examples of this are member at institution name, for example, member at kidderminster.ac.uk or staff at kidderminster.ac.uk. And this attribute is multi-valued because a user could have different affiliations to the same institution. The eduperson targeted ID provides a unique identifier attribute for that particular user, which is useful in instances where you want to provide persistent sessions across your website. For example, you may want to save searches and that kind of thing. This is based off an attribute in your Active Directory or eDirectory, for example, and must be unique. So that unique opaque string is generated from another unique value from your user database. If it wasn't generated from a unique value, then you could have instances where the same people have the same unique identifiers, which essentially could mean people could see other people's data when they access web resources. Eduperson principal name is used less on websites, but is one that you need to have available. And it is essentially just the user login name. So I'd be ebedos@kidderminster.ac.uk. Generally, that one is tried to be avoided because what we're trying to do with Shibboleth is keep things as anonymous as possible. So where possible, we'll try and use the eduperson targeted ID instead of personal principal names. And the last one is the eduperson entitlement, and this is really for custom specific attribute values. So it could be a particular website needs a particular string to get access. So this one's useful as a cover for if the other attributes don't actually fit your requirements. So for example, if you want to be more specific than just all staff at an institution, you could say anyone with this particular value, so it could be ICT staff, you could have that value in your entitlement, for example.